The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports, media, industrial, business complex. We're down to a two-man gang today, so it'll be Steve and myself, Chris Larry, talking about these topics. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing fine. Just so everybody knows, John is upright and sober and everything. He just had something else to do today, at the last minute, so we're fine. But I'm doing fine. There's just so many great things going on in sports right now, that just make me laugh. They really do, because just the absurdity of some of this stuff coupled with just such enormous amounts of money going around just always entertain me. So this is why I love doing this show.
Well, there we go. Yes, we are. By the time you are getting this in your earballs, we'll be probably right smack dab in the run up to the Super Bowl and the hype and all of that. So it is definitely a gluttonous time in sports business. The Super Bowl week is maybe the height of sports business gluttony.
Oh, yeah. And listen, if you guys have never had a chance to live through a Super Bowl in the city where it's going on, it is a sight to be seen. Let me tell you something. And especially if you ever have a chance to work Super Bowl stuff, there's just so much more going on than people realize. It turns the city into like New Orleans during Mardi Gras for a week, basically. It's a really interesting sight to be seen. If you ever have a chance, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, the funny thing is, when it was in New York, you could barely notice. Just because
well, that's New York.
The size of New York, and because the actual game site is not in the city, so that separation. The thing I did notice is I actually had to do business travel that Monday morning, and that you could tell because it was like all people coming back and forth from the game.
Well, how much time do you spend in Manhattan, Chris?
Not a ton. I'm mostly in Brooklyn, but I can be. It depends, but yeah, and then even more if you weren't in Midtown, you could even be in Lower or Upper Manhattan and not have felt it.
Well, that's what I'm getting at exactly right there. Because the Super Bowl in New York was out at the Meadowlands, but there's nothing out at the Meadowlands but a stadium and nothing. Basically, with all apologies to New Jersey residents. So the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl starts on Tuesday and then it really gets going on Wednesday. And all that stuff probably happened in Midtown, all the parties and all the everything. And so if you were in Midtown, I think even New York would have noticed the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. If you were in Midtown, you definitely would have.
But if you're they had it in Jacksonville that one year, I mean, that's like a citywide takeover. You can't get anything done if you work downtown during a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think that's why, ultimately, there's so many positive reasons or business reasons to have it in New York City, media capital, advertising, yada, yada. But I think its enormity and the separation between site and downtown actually, in the end, make it not a great location for it, whether even on the side.
What, New York, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, although there's other cities that have that problem. Houston has that problem. Because the NRG Stadium is not anywhere near downtown. So there's that. Atlanta is probably going to be a nightmare this week. The week you're listening to this, because the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium is right downtown. And so I would venture a guess, if you work downtown Atlanta, God bless you. Say a prayer to whatever your deity of choice is, because it's going to be a nightmare for you. See, I think you also have to measure the loss of productivity of the people who work in the city compared to what's bringing in. So there is an X minus Y component, I think, to Super Bowls coming into your city.
Yeah, cash in your PTO if you're a really nasty company, furlough for a week.
Yeah, there you go. It's probably worthwhile.
All right, so enjoy all that. You'll be right smack dab in the middle of it. But we're going to jump into some other topics here. The first topic that we're actually going to jump into is NFL related, and this is, we had some kind of strange legal, business, legislative reactions to the NFC Championship game. Steve, do you want to let our listeners know what actions the people of New Orleans are taking?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so if your head was in Iraq, or you were deployed to Africa, or you were just still sick and in the hospital for a week, you unless you had one of those things happen, you saw the NFC Championship game and you saw the refs make what was certainly one of the most egregious blown or missed calls in the history of the NFL, at least that I can remember. And that blown call was the missed pass interference call there at the end of the game, which it ultimately basically cost the Saints the opportunity to run the clock out and win the game and go to the Super Bowl. So predictably, the fans in New Orleans were very upset, which that I can't blame them on. But the really fun part is that there is now a class action lawsuit filed by a local New Orleans attorney that lists as the lead plaintiffs two Saints season ticket holders. And it's, the cause of it. I tried to get the petition because I think it would have been really entertaining reading. But thanks to the New Orleans Parish civil district clerk wanting to charge me a subscription fee to get it, I didn't want to pay it. So I don't actually have the petition in front of me, which is a shame because I refuse to kowtow to the New Orleans, New Orleans demand for ransom to get a petition. So anyway, so the causes of actions are things like loss of enjoyment of life, distrust of the game, distrust in the NFL, mental anguish, emotional trauma, predictably. I don't think there's a legal textbook anywhere that lists distrust of the game or distrust of the NFL as a valid cause of action. Here, look, this lawsuit is going to go absolutely nowhere. Zero. It will get poured out of court as soon as a court can pour it out of court. I think this attorney is just doing this for attention because he doesn't want to have to buy drinks in New Orleans again, most likely. This is not a serious lawsuit. The plaintiffs may think it's serious, but it really and truly isn't. I think this lawsuit has kind of an undertone. Again, I haven't read it, but from what I have read about the petition, there's sort of an undertone of shareholder derivative type lawsuit here. Because the petition is sort of giving the impression that the Saints season ticket holders have a stake in this, and that's why some of these causes of action can be dreamed up. But at the same time, it has like an undertone of negligence to it also, because you hear things about loss of enjoyment of life, as those type of things are negligence. So he's mixing a whole bunch of concepts here together. I have a ton of thoughts on this, but Chris, thoughts?
First, I had an emotional reaction because I actually consider myself, I sort of have adopted the Drew Brees New Orleans Saints as my number 2 team, which by the time you get to something like the playoffs, as a Redskins fan, you need a number 2 team.
Because we're never in it. Yeah.
So I was emotionally invested in the game and actually pretty upset and frustrated. I mean, not at the level of the locals, but and I still think this is the most ridiculous thing that I have ever heard. It's so dumb. We actually have a couple more examples of overreactions by folks at this level, and I couldn't agree more. And in fact, if you look at it from this angle, it's a brilliant publicity stunt for this lawyer. Probably, helps him drum up business and gets his name in paper and all that. So if you actually
that's why he's doing
look at it from that angle, it's genius. If you look at it from having any kind of impact on anything, the game, the class action suit folks, the season ticket holders, anything on that end, it's completely ridiculous. But congratulations to you all for helping the lawyer, get free advertising.
Yeah, okay. Here's how you can tell. Well, first of all, let me back up. Well, there's a provision in the CBA that basically allows the commissioner to restart a game if something really egregious happens. And so what that's really getting at is like if a fan jumps out of the stands and tackles the quarterback, or like a light fixture falls, and they can't play from the ceiling, they can't play the game. If something outside the bounds of the field happens, the commissioner does have have the power to say, okay, Mox Nix on this game, we're going to restart it tomorrow after this is fixed. That's what this provision is for. Nobody can reasonably expect the commissioner of the NFL to want to restart a game just because of a blown call, because that's truly that's the Pandora's box of all Pandora's boxes. If you start going down that road, so that's ridiculous. I completely lost my train of thought here now, but yeah, it's I think they have a problem right from the get-go. Okay, there's no standing here. These season ticket holders have no standing just because they're season ticket holders. Right from that, forget about any of the rest of it. They have no standing to bring this lawsuit. All buying a ticket does is you purchase a license to watch a game. That's it. You have no stake in the game. You have no stake in the finances of the game. You don't own a part of the game. You literally have bought the right to sit in a seat. So there is absolutely no standing whatsoever for them to bring a case like that, and that's just problem number one. But here's how you can. This is what I was going to say. Here's how you can really tell this isn't a serious lawsuit. What I understand is that there is a request for injunctive relief in here, but if this is a real case, the hearing on getting a restraining order to stop the Super Bowl would have already happened. We were recording this over the weekend on Sunday, and that hearing hasn't happened yet. So that's how you can tell that this lawyer really knows. Because if he was serious, to get a restraining order, you have to show that there's irreparable harm. Okay, and so the idea here would be saying if you play the Super Bowl, there's irreparable harm because the Saints can't be in it. But you would want to do that as soon as possible. You would not want to wait a week or more before you file to get in front of a judge, and particularly since it filed in local court, not federal court, a real lawsuit would have already been in front of a judge days ago. And that's how you can tell, more than anything else, that this is just all a publicity stunt by an attorney who is using his clients for publicity.
And let's remember that this is, it's New Orleans, and this is a city known for its flamboyance, for its, colorfulness, all of those type of things. So it's not surprising that we've had a myriad of these kinds of reactions. It is part of the city's culture. In fact, just this week on the Senate floor, one of their two senators, Senator Bill Cassidy, used his Senate floor time. Now, remember, at the time, the government was shut down. He used 50 seconds of his floor time to talk about whatever narrative he had about the shutdown, but then the rest of his time to talk about this egregious call, including giant blown up photos on tripods, et cetera, breaking down the egregiousness of this call. So, this sort of colorful overreaction, attention grabbing thing made it about this call, about this game, made it all the way to the Senate floor. So, the outsized reaction of Saints fans at all levels was, I guess, probably to be expected.
Yeah, and if you want to, hunt out your YouTube account, there is actually now a hip hop song that somebody produced about the blown call. So yeah, part of this is just colorful New Orleans goings on, But I mean, thank God the senator wasted time during a government shutdown to worry about a football game. I couldn't have slept at night unless my senator had brought it up instead of worrying about things like funding the government. It's just crazy. I mean, this is not the only dumb lawsuit that's ever been filed against the NFL. There's been a string of things like this going on, and it's just a shame that people bring these things and they don't realize that all they're really doing is getting their lawyers paid, more so than bringing a case that actually is a real case. And this is the type of thing that clogs up courts, because courts have to deal with this stupidity. And so that's going to keep somebody who has a real case from getting his case heard in, a timely manner. It's, so this is the type of thing that I just don't. It's fun to talk about and haha and everything, but all it's really doing ultimately is wasting taxpayers' money via clogging up the court system. And if you want to make your lawyer rich, like you said, Chris, I mean, this dude is never going to have to buy a drink in New Orleans again. He's going to be forever known as the guy who sued the NFL, and it's going to drum up business for him. And these season ticket holders are going to get absolutely nothing other than possibly an order to pay the NFL's attorney's fees out of this. And believe me, I can speak from personal experience with this. The NFL spends a lot of money on attorney's fees. Okay, it's not a cheap thing. So
Yeah, that is not a bill that I would want to pick up.
oh no, the NFL does not skimp on attorneys in any way, shape, or form.
Now we can have a laugh at this and at this part of it, but there are some serious issues for the NFL here, and it brought up a lot of different questions about replay, about the fairness, about lots of game related things. And yes, this was a moment in a huge part of the season, had a lot of ramifications about the Super Bowl, et cetera, et cetera. But really, this call was not, or having a bad call impact a game was not an anomaly this season in the NFL. And, do we have a sense that the reffing, the way games are called, the impact of referees and the rules on the game, is this an issue for the NFL? And more importantly, from a business standpoint, is it harming their product?
Well, yeah, it's harming the product, and I'll tell you why. And this is going to, Chris, we've talked about this on the show before. There was a betting line, on this game. It was Saints -3, I believe, was the line that most houses had. And this, there's a lot of money that changed hands as a result of a blown call. And so this would have made a whole bunch of bettors and a whole bunch of gambling houses really angry. And this is the type of thing, and no, I don't think these refs are being paid. I know Todd Gurley apparently posted that photo on his Instagram site, that was a photoshopped photo of him posing with a ref. And yes, if those of you follow the Hogside Twitter, yes, I sent this out. Yes, I did know all along it was a Photoshop. I just was curious as to see the reaction for people. But I think where it causes people to lose faith in the product a little bit. But from a financial and business standpoint, the NFL's about to get really cozy with with MGM. And it's only going to get worse in terms of gambling. Worse is a bad term. It's only going to get deeper, the relationship, in the coming years. So if you have things like huge blown calls that cost millions of dollars to change hands the wrong way, that's when it becomes serious, I think.
Yeah, and it really did put an exclamation point on a season where, bad officiating was a weekly narrative in multiple games, many weeks. Now, I think the NFL, one of the main reasons that they had this was that they actually had a high degree of turnover this year. So you were dealing with just across the board a less experienced referee cohort. So that should improve over time. You're not going to get that level of turnover or change every year. So, from the NFL probably knew and were holding their breath that they were going to take some lumps and wait for, these referees and line judges, et cetera, to just mature in their jobs like any job. And there'll be, I'm sure, a spate of rule changes and at least, competition committee looking at different things, whether it's, making something like pass interference a reviewable thing on replay and other pieces. So you'll see some reactions and probably some overreactions from there. But it did feel like ever since the referee strike, lockout, whatever that was, where we had replacement refs, it did feel like the first year, since then, where you really felt like this was a continuing narrative for the league. And that's never good because, everybody involved, including the referees, quite frankly, want them to be the most quiet part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, this wasn't the only call, as you said. The Redskins Houston game turned on a penalty at the end and gave the Texans the game, and that wasn't nearly the only one. I think the rational discussion, the discussion shouldn't be lawsuit. We brought this up because it's entertaining and it's a good laugh, but the real discussion is replay. Because there's a way to fix this. There's cameras all over the place, and you can basically find any angle for any play on the field. And so I think the real question for the NFL is, do you want to expand the replay rules to allow teams to challenge more things? In my view of it, which I think is probably a minority view from the reaction I've seen in the comments section on our website and other places, I think the rule really ought to be absolutely everything that goes on a field. 100% of anything in a game ought to be reviewable. Now, I'm not saying allow teams an unlimited amount of challenges. I'm saying, they already have, 3 challenges now, I believe? I'm saying if you want to use one of your challenges, one of your limited number of challenges on something, by all means do it. I think there ought to be no limitation on what can be reviewed within the context of a team having a limited number of challenges. I think that's how you fix it, because, on this play, New Orleans, throws a challenge flag, or in the last minute of the game, it's reviewable, and the NFL looks at it and goes, yeah, that's obvious. Pass interference, and, oh, by the way, helmet-to-helmet contact, 2 penalties, easy fix. But the rules prevent that from happening. So that's how the NFL can make a positive change as a result of what has happened this year in that game and others. And that would really fix it. Now, some people seem to disagree with me and think that it's going to slow down the game. Number one, I don't care if it slows down the game. And number two, I don't think it will, because you're not allowing teams to challenge more. You're just allowing them to challenge more stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, as long as you're limiting your strategic ability to use that right, or, that part of the game, then it really shouldn't, elongate the game. And you'll have plenty of dumb coaches, Andy Reid's not a dumb coach, but on these things he is, that will throw it in the first quarter over like a 3rd and 8 catch, no catch, and they won't have it at their disposal. Yeah. So
and that's a strategic decision, which makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. So I would probably sign on for that. I mean, you could make a slippery slope argument around like that, but I would probably be mostly on your side here, Steve, and I think they could easily manage that. I mean, people said the same arguments about replay in general, and then we had that break in replay, which was horrible, and they brought it back. So I mean, I think those same arguments existed on replay at all, and they really haven't come to fruition in terms of ruining the game.
Yeah, of course. And particularly for pass interference calls, if you could pick just one thing that needs to be reviewable, it's a pass interference call, because that could be a 50-yard penalty. And you're telling me that a team shouldn't be allowed to challenge it just because the NFL's deemed it to be a judgment call. Well, you know what? All this stuff is a judgment call. To be honest, it's not objective. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. This is, what did the ref think he saw or she saw? There's a couple female refs now. What did the refs think he or she saw? And I have zero problem bashing the ref's ego a little bit and allowing the front office to look at it in video. Particularly a pass interference call that is could be a monumental swing in the game. So that's my opinion. A lot of you I know don't agree with that. I don't think, respectfully to all you guys who think that, I don't think you're thinking about this clearly. I really don't. So that's what the NFL, in my opinion, could do to fix this situation.
And 100% can guarantee that that will be discussed by the competition committee this offseason.
Oh, yeah, because this is embarrassing. Because you could argue that the wrong team's in the Super Bowl, and that's not something that the NFL ever wants to have hanging over it. Because what's going to be the first highlight in the Super Bowl pregame? It's going to be that play. It's going to be replayed over and over and over again. You're going to have Saints fans writing things about asterisks, Super Bowls, all sorts of things like that. And that the NFL wants us to be a celebration of itself, not have a one blown call hanging over it. So yeah, I think this is going to be topic number 1 on the competition committee in the spring meetings.
In fact, they're pretty lucky that the Rams were a legitimate Super Bowl team. If this had been like some wild card team that somehow had scrapped their way to this game, it would have been an uglier look. And to follow up on your girly Photoshop ref photo, that actually, some of you might know Mike Francesa. He's part of Mike and the Mad Dog, kind of invented sports talk radio, an institution here in New York City. He actually was faked by that, and then when he was called on it, like 2 days later, he was then spinning so hard that what he was saying in terms of how egregious it was that happened and what a bad look, he was claiming that sources inside the NFL were telling him that even though the photo was fake, the issues were real. So he took almost 3 days of 5 hours on the radio having to wouldn't even just admit that he made a mistake and fell for a photoshopped picture, which in today's world, listen, it happens. You can kind of just say my bad and move on, but he instead spent 2 days digging his hole deeper.
Well, that's very Mike Francesa-like,
definitely.
though. I mean, that's very in character, and funny because that's his tweet about that is what I re-forwarded, and I suckered a whole bunch of people into it. Yes, obviously. Look, the ref had football pants on, for God's sakes. Okay, it was the world's worst Photoshop ever. He had one hand that was black and one hand that was white, skin color. It was very obviously a Photoshop, and Francesca should be ashamed that he fell for it. Number one, but I think that's part of it's like hashtag content. Hey, this gives him something to talk about for a week, but also that dude is such an arrogant jerk.
Oh, he's never admitted he's wrong in 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's so arrogant that he's not willing to admit he's going to dream up some other angle on it. That's funny. I mean, the if you haven't heard Mike Francesca talk, I know it's a very New York thing, but he's entertaining.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah.
In fact, when we'll move on in 2 seconds, but if you're interested at all or like him or whatever, the Mike and the Mad Dog 30 for 30 that they did about a year ago is very entertaining hour documentary on ESPN.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, it's entertaining.
All right, so we will move on here, but we will see how this plays out, of course, and I'm sure once the NFL does start to look at it, we might circle back to this as a topic in the future. The next thing we're going to go in is, this is a kind of an interesting time in the calendar, sports calendar, because we actually have, of the 4 major team sports leagues, we have 2 of their All-Star games back-to-back. The NHL All-Star game, or whatever they call it, was last night, Saturday night, and today, where we're recording Sunday, will be the NFL's Pro Bowl, and then even just in a couple weeks, we'll have the NBA's All-Star game. So we sort of have, boom, boom, boom in terms of All-Star games. Obviously, baseball's in midsummer. And I think we can all agree that these are mostly unwatchable and silly pageants at this point. So we're going to look a little bit at why the leagues do them. Not that they pick, who their All-Stars are, but why not just leave that as an announcement, and instead we play these games. And there actually are some financial reasons why these games are played. Interesting thing, we start with baseball, was that the 2018 All-Star Game had its lowest TV ratings in 50 years and had its highest revenue. So even if you look at something like fan interest, it did not mean that they weren't making money from this game. They had their highest ad revenue ever from its lowest rated All-Star game in 50 years. Then there's reasons for that, but one being that it is literally the lowest point in the sports calendar. So, and real sports junkies will be watching because there's, it's their methadone at that point. So the advertisers know that, so they'll spend more even if it's a smaller audience. And obviously the pomp and circumstances. The NBA in LA All-Star game last year meant over $110 million in revenue by one economics firm that studied it. That mixes a couple things, obviously ticket sales and ad revenue, but also, the money spent in the local economy, et cetera, et cetera. They have a methodology. It's tight. So obviously in DC, I think is this year, they're looking at over $100 million in revenue generated. So these things obviously make money, even though they are a poor representation of the sport on the field. Thoughts, Steve?
Yeah. The NFL isn't doing this because they have some just insane need to put on a Pro Bowl. They're only doing it the end because it's generating revenue for them. There's plenty of content in the week before the Super Bowl. They could fill it. They could fill this weekend with anything. And it would be fun. They're doing it because the Pro Bowl makes money. I know we all make fun of it. We all talk about how poor of a game it is, and it is unwatchable football. But it doesn't matter to the NFL. They're going to keep doing it as long as ESPN is paying them to put on the game, or some channel, the NFL Network, ESPN, ABC, whoever it is. They're getting paid, and advertisers think people are watching it. That is the only reason. The NBA All-Star Game is a little bit different because they use that as sort of their Super Bowl. If you've ever been in an NBA All-Star city while it's going on, what you see is it has kind of a Super Bowl atmosphere to it. It's a huge gathering of the entire basketball world. That is not the case with the NFL Pro Bowl, because the Super Bowl is that for the NFL. But the NBA, it's all the big money people, all the advertisers, all the big names in the game, because the NFL or the NBA finals are an ad hoc thing, because you never know who's going to be in them. And so this is the point in the calendar in which the NBA can bring everybody together. And so that's what the NBA All-Star Game serves, that function, for the NBA. And that's the same with baseball. And presumably hockey too. I'm not a big hockey fan like you are, Chris, but that's sort of the inherent benefit to those games. They're all basically unwatchable. Even the NBA, which is high scoring, but there's no defense. It's a terrible game. But I think what's most interesting in terms of the watchability of it is that, at least in the case of the NBA and the baseball All-Star games, that the skills competitions are more watchable than the games. And I bet you, like the NBA Saturday night thing they do before the All-Star game, I bet you the ratings for that are higher than the game. They're getting, I don't know that, I'm just guessing, but they're getting like a block of 2 hours in prime time on Saturday night to put that on. And so that's a whole nother revenue generator thing. The NFL has their skills competition, but it's during the day. Notice that? It happened on Saturday this week in the middle of the day. That means, believe me, if they thought more people would watch, it'd be on primetime, okay? And so it's not a big eyeballs thing. So the reason they're doing these is solely and only for money. And plus, in the case of some of these sports, it's an opportunity to get their whole sporting world together. That's why it goes on.
Yeah, the NBA really was smart about this, and this was probably because they made these are the kind of decisions that were probably made 15, 20 years ago for to make this their Super Bowl week. In terms of marketing, in terms of party, in terms of all of those type of things Steve's already gone through. And they tweaked their league towards making that happen. The other thing about hockey and the NBA is that, one, you don't, as Steve said, you don't know where the finals are going to be. So you can't plan. You can't, because these things take a lot of infrastructure, a lot of setup in whatever the host city is. So you can't just wait until, 5 to 6 days before to know where you're doing this. Also, in series-based sports, so this would include baseball as well, they're drawn over 7 games, hopefully, if it's a competitive series. So you don't have a moment. You've got 10 days, 2 weeks of tension in games. It's a different construct. So it's harder to have a nightly moment on that front. The sports columnist Mike, and also this is cultural with the NBA, the sports columnist Michael Wilbon, I think probably like 15 years ago, dubbed it NBA All-Star Weekend Black Thanksgiving. And so it's also got a cultural element around it in terms of what, just from what is celebrated and how. And you can see, if you pay attention, that is a big piece of that, is it is a celebration of African-American culture at the NBA Finals. So there's a lot of reasons on that. They do the best of sort of owning the space. None of these games are very good, but I will say, at least if you have at least at NBA and Major League Baseball, the risk of injury is so much less. Now, of course, you can blow out a knee walking, onto the court or, going to the batter's box or whatever. So, yes. But with physical sports like the NFL and the NHL, more and more players, for their personal calculus, it makes no sense to play in these games to a large degree. You're going to go and get your brain rattled around, and also it means in those sports, the players that do play also know they're not going to go. You have to play those sports full on. The NBA, Major League Baseball, you can kind of round the bases or take a bunch of 3-pointers. You can go easy on each other. It's very hard to play hockey or football and sort of do it halfway, and you just open up yourself to increased risk. So you're also seeing, at the NFL, you'll see, you've got guys that really should not be in the game if you look at it from a kind of all-pro type of viewpoint playing in this game. And that's because the smart ones, don't want to put themselves in risk. In the hockey game, Alex Ovechkin is still one of the top 2 to 3 players in the league. He just said, I'm out this year, it doesn't make any sense for my career at this point of my age, of where I am in the game and what I'm trying to accomplish to show up at this game.
Yeah, and number one, I think the one exception to that rule you're talking about is starting pitchers, and you'll see sometimes.
Yeah, they boxed out too. Yeah,
and sometimes you'll see team managers. There will be a report of a team manager talking to the all-star manager and saying, "Look, you can't play my guy because I need him." And that's the one thing. No team wants to see a starting pitcher burned on the all-star game and have him miss a start. That will affect a pennant race or something. So that's the one. I think that's the one thing. Here's how the NFL at least entices players to do this. They are actually okay. Let me back up. Football players get paid every week in the NFL. They do not get paid 12 months a year. They get a weekly game check. Okay. they do not get their same level of game check during the playoffs. The CBA actually governs the amount of money that players who play in playoff games will get. Now, I have the 2017 playoff bonuses in front of me. Just as an example, wild card round, division winners, they got a game check of $28,000. Well, that's a lot for you and I. That's chump change for NFL game checks for the most part. Super Bowl winners get in again 2017, 102,000. Super Bowl losers 56,000. The Pro Bowl participants got a check in 2017 for $64,000, meaning if you played in the Pro Bowl, you got more money than the Super Bowl loser. That's the way that the NFL is trying to entice people to go to play in these games, because they do want the better players. The way that the NFL wants to keep the ratings higher is to have better players. They don't want the 10th quarterback to come in and play. They'd rather have Tom Brady play in the Pro Bowl, knowing Tom Brady hasn't played in like a decade. Okay, but the way that they're trying to do that is to pay these players enough money that will entice them to go. But that having been said, it's not working, because as you point out, Chris, a lot of players just say, no, there's no reason why I should do this, for my health, and a bunch of other reasons. And look at, the famous Sean Taylor play where he blew up the punter in the 2006 Pro Bowl, I believe that was. Nobody wants to have that. We love Sean Taylor around here, but nobody wants to see that happen in the Pro Bowl. And that's a perfect example of why people want to play. They don't want to get blown up in the middle of a play just for a Pro Bowl. So with the exception of starting pitchers, I think the NFL has a bigger problem, and that's probably also why they don't market it in the same way. That's one of the many reasons why they don't market it in the same way. You just can't. You can't take a week off in the middle of the season and play a Pro Bowl like you do in basketball and you do in hockey and baseball. It's because no team would let their players play in it. You cannot risk injury and risk ruining a season, if you played the Pro Bowl in like October. That just wouldn't work. It's too dangerous. So I'm surprised hockey allows it too. The hockey has the same problem.
We'll end with this. I found a funny quote. So to speak to what you were just talking about, Tom Brady hasn't played or actually even suited up since 2005.
Okay, so it was more than 10 years.
And former Patriots linebacker Brandon Spikes actually has a funny quote when he was passed over for a Pro Bowl. He said, "I didn't get picked to go to the Pro Bowl. I was moping around, actually in tears, and a few guys are trying to lift me up. It's like, it's going to be all right, man. We've got to worry about what's in front of us." Then the Pharaoh himself walks up to me. I used to call Brady the Pharaoh, and he hated that. Brady walks up to me and says, "Hey, Brandon, you think I play this blah, blah, blah Pro Bowls? Get it together. Get your head up. We're trying to win rings. That's why I'm here."
He couldn't care less about the Pro Bowl.
So, and ever since they moved it to the in-between week, you can pretty much assure that anywhere probably from minimum 5 to 10 players who, would be on Super Bowl teams are probably going to be stocking any all-star team are eliminated from even showing up at the game at all because they still have the Super Bowl to play.
Yeah. Well, I think the NFL... No, number one, also, $64,000 to Tom Brady doesn't register on his radar scope, okay? He's married to a supermodel who makes more money than he does. So the idea of enticing Tom Brady with a $60,000 check is like offering him a Big Mac, for a guy that wealthy. But, I think the NFL likes the idea of having the calendar end at the Super Bowl. It sort of felt like a poorly written denouement, if you will, and to put it in literary terms, to have the Super Bowl happen, and then a week later, we'll have the Pro Bowl. It wasn't a proper conclusion to the movie, that is the season, and I think that's why they moved it. It gives them some content, for the off week. I mean, again, I think you could fill it with anything, but this is a perfect thing to fill the time with. And it gives sort of a better conclusion, and so the NFL can then flow right into free agency. So I think that's why they moved it. It used to be in Hawaii. They probably moved it from Hawaii just from a travel perspective. Either that or they're somehow making more money in Orlando than they did in Honolulu. One of those two things, maybe both. But yeah, I mean, it guarantees the Super Bowl participants aren't going to play, automatically. So but they're clearly trying to make it easier on people. We'll put it in Orlando. Maybe more people will go. You don't have a 5-hour flight to overseas to have to go play in a Pro Bowl game, So you can go right from Orlando right to Atlanta. It makes it a little bit easier and smoother on the players, I think, the participants.
Before one final thing to sort of put an underline to what Steve says about fiscal incentives, and obviously hockey is at a much different economic scale than the NFL in any way that you would define that. And one thing that they did to keep players, two things they've actually done to keep players from opting out is, one, they actually have $1 million purse to the winning team that gets distributed amongst the players and coaches. So there's actually, the winner gets a prize, so to speak. And also, and this will happen to Ovechkin this year, you also basically opt into a 2-game suspension. So you do get a on the ice penalty for deciding not to show up. So
Really?
They're doing so all the leagues are doing things that at least have some speed bumps and incentives to have their biggest stars show up.
Well, that's because it's I think more important in hockey to have Alex Ovechkin show up at the NHL All-Star game. Because I'm a hockey fan in the most casual sense only, and if I hear that Ovechkin, for example, or pick your star, Gretzky is playing, I might watch it. Whereas I'm just probably not going to sit down and watch your average NHL All-Star game without having a reason to do so. I didn't watch it last night. I knew it was on.
I'm a huge fan, and I didn't watch it.
Yeah, okay, there you go. But if you get more star players there, is it more likely for someone like me to tune in, which is better for advertisers? Sure. And that's why. Whereas the NFL knows that they have a built-in audience, who's going to watch it. I don't think they really need Tom Brady there to generate a minimum number of eyeballs on the game and satisfy advertisers.
That is true. All right, so we will transition here as into the NFL offseason, so to speak. With talking about a trend that we really is just sort of kicked off in 2016 and now seems to be gaining a lot of speed. And that is players who see themselves as picks in the NFL draft, and often, top 3 picks, although not exclusively, are starting to opt out of whatever, Tostitos bowl game or, toilet bowl game that their college has been.
What was it called? It was the Gasparilla Bad Boy Mower Bowl.
Yeah, it was some riding mower company, yeah. And so they're making the calculation that it is bad for their personal business to play in those bowl games. This started in 2016 with Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey, who were thought of themselves and, in fact, were top 10 picks that year as 2 players. And that caused a lot of controversy, a lot of gnashing of teeth, a lot of this isn't right, blah, 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 blah. Now, they went top 10. They both got huge contracts, huge signing bonuses, it was still within the rookie scale, obviously, but at the top end of that. So it made total sense for them. And we have now, that opened the floodgates to what we're seeing now is lots of players opting out, and even ones that might project, or even in last year ended up even going 4th, 5th, 6th round, opting out of playing in their bowl game for their draft status.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, this year Will Grier, who's one of the top quarterbacks, probably number 3 on most people's boards, he opted out of the bowl game. What was West Virginia playing in? The Camping World Bowl. Do you think it's more important to Will Grier to prepare for the draft and stay healthy, or win the Camping World Bowl? Please be serious. The number 1 tight end opted out, of the game, that guy from Iowa, Fant, and the coach kind of bashed him for it a little bit. Listen to this quote. "We are disappointed Noah will not be finishing the season with his teammates." Yeah, that's a way to be supportive. Congratulations, coach, on that one. The number 1 defensive tackle on the board, Rashawn Gary from Michigan opted out. N'Keal Harry from Arizona, the wide receiver, who's one of the top wide receivers, opted out. There's a whole list. Now, I'll take you back years and years ago. Willis McGahee, who was a running back with the University of Miami, tore his ACL in a bowl game.
In a big bowl game, even.
Yeah, it was a big bowl game, and that affected his entire career. It affected his draft status. It changed where he was going to play. It affected the amount of money he ultimately made, because of the rookie contract he got wasn't as big, all to win a bowl game. Now, we talked about, 2 shows ago, Chris, or was the last show? I can't remember, about the phoniness and the absolute fallacy of the way these bowl games operate and what they mean. I don't blame Will Grier a bit for not wanting to play in the Camping World Bowl when it meant it's an exhibition that isn't designed to make money for local businessmen. Period. Doesn't mean anything to these teams whatsoever. So I can't blame these players anyway. I think they're making a wise choice in skipping these bowl games. I recommend everybody skip them. Anybody who has NFL aspirations as a senior, skip those bowl games. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I co-sign that for sure. And even, this does connect to the conversations that we've had about the college football and the way it handles its, postseason, I guess you would call it, is now that they've gone to the 4-team playoff and, that it's made those other, so that means there's basically 2 games that matter in college football's, well, I guess 3 if once the championship game, that matter in college football's postseason. Back in the 10, 12 years ago, even in the BCL or whatever they called it, and then obviously before that, BCS, you had things on the line, at least on a chunk of bowl games, whether it was like the Big Ten Championship or, you had more. So now there's, except for those 2 games, and then obviously the championship game, there's no stakes. And so even in Willis McGahee's time, those games meant something more. Now they're completely useless unless you're one of the top 4 teams. So why would you put yourself in harm's way? Jalen Smith, who's now a Cowboy and blew out his ACL and LCL in the 2016 Fiesta Bowl, that's not the toilet bowl. Fiesta Bowl is... Yeah,
he was the other one. I was trying to think. I couldn't remember who it was. And there's one more that had happened.
Yeah, these are decades past Willis McGahee, basically. And he still went to number 34, but he probably lost at least $2 or $3 million. He was good enough to be, for people to look past that to some degree, but his stock definitely dropped. And that's probably an anomaly of a player that talented where you could overlook that and still spend a top draft pick on. And it still cost him $2-3 million.
Yeah, think about it like this. If you are a projected 4th or 5th round pick, and you tear your knee up in the Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl, you may go undrafted. Because this happens in late December, you are not going to be healthy in time for training camp if you really tear a knee up in a bowl game. And so you may lose out on being drafted for it. And that's just dumb. I'm sorry, that's dumb. And no coach should be bashing a player for not wanting to be with his teammates. If you're a senior... or you're a junior who's going to go out for the draft, I think your coach needs to be supportive, of you and not complain that you're not going to be with your teammates. Maybe that quote I read from the Iowa coach was out of context. I don't know. And if it was, I'm sorry. But I don't blame him at all. And again, if it's a choice of me possibly being drafted or not being drafted, I'm going to pick drafted every time. Thanks.
Yeah, they just played for free for at least 2 years, given the NFL's draft rules. So they're not looking to do that for more than they have to. And look at some of the 2017 opt-outs. Here's a couple names, and just think about this past year of football: Denzel Ward, Bradley Chubb, and Josh Rosen. Those guys, big names. They had. So what if you can see directly on the field and in their career arc, if they had, something had happened to them, their career and sometimes life is radically altered.
Yeah, Josh Rosen was at UCLA, and UCLA wasn't playing in any bowl game that mattered, for any reason. I don't honestly remember what happened in that bowl game, but, I think it's far less important to Josh Rosen than him being, a top 5 pick in the NFL. For sure. Denzel Ward, Ohio State, they were in a playoff last year, if I recall, right? But, again, hey, I'm sorry. If it's a choice between him being a first-round draft pick and not, I just can't blame him. And I guess college fans are probably upset, but I think you made the best point out of all of it. The way that the playoff system's gone now, there truly are only 3 games that matter. The rest of them have become far more exhibition-y than they ever were before. Because the Rose Bowl used to matter. It used to be a really big event. And now for like the years that the Rose Bowl isn't in the rotation for these playoff games, nobody cares. I used to religiously watch the Rose Bowl every year. I'm a big Pac-10. I'm not a huge college football fan, period. But I'm in terms of my college football rooting interest, I'm more of Pac-10, Big Ten fan more than anything. That was my game. I haven't watched that game in a couple years because it just doesn't interest me to watch an exhibition game that people are only half interested in anymore. I think. I mean, we're getting away from draft picks here, but I think college football has a real problem with these bowl games. Attendance is dwindling. They're really finding it hard to get people to watch some of these games because it matters so little, and they're making money. It becomes financially viable because, as we said, the money from the playoff trickles down and all that. But at some point, there's like a cost versus benefit of these bowl games. They need to cut bowl games, not add them at a minimum.
And because gambling in sports is a big thread on this show, obviously, for a variety of reasons, and it's only increasing, you can really kind of... having this many bowl games during that part of the sports calendar, gambling is really one of the only reasons that some of these things limp along, because it just means you have a spate of games in which you can take action on. Becomes really one of the only legitimate or illegitimate reasons to have these games.
Well, you know what's interesting? I should have mentioned this on the show we did about the bowl games, and I just forgot. ESPN owns about 15 of these games, something like 15 of these bowl games, and they're televising them. But they own the bowl game, because what I told you guys before was that most of these bowl games are owned by local business. They're owned and operated by local businessmen, and so it's their way to basically, it's a boondoggle. Their way to make a bunch of money. And so yes, gambling's a part of it, but the people who own the bowl games have a financial interest in it. Also, that's sort of separate and apart from the gambling part. In the case of ESPN, they want to drum up eyes to watch the games that they own. And so that's why. But it's just such a terrible product. I think at some point we're going to come to a tipping point with these bowl games, because it seems like every year people care less and less and less about it.
Well, Oh, totally. Unless you got action. We'll leave you on this one just because this really is an individual choice on these players and in their investment in themselves, basically. Bradley Chubb, we all agree that running backs put themselves in the most harm. They have the shortest shelf life, So Bradley Chubb, his signing bonus was $17.9 million. We live in a culture where people will go on TV and eat a Madagascar hissing cockroach for $5,000. Why would you put yourself, in basically a car crash at the chance, upping your chance to lose $18 million? I mean, that's just insanity that anyone could criticize that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's certainly crazy.
All right, well, we're going to jump. We're going to get out on this last quick story, which is a pretty big jump in dollar amount from even Mr. Chubb's signing bonus. And that is, kind of the two biggest, I don't know, celebrity owners might be the wrong term, but infamous owners might be better. Jerry Jones and Daniel Snyder have competing, I don't know what, yachts. Yachts almost is the wrong word for these things. They're almost personal cruise ships at this point.
Yeah, they really are.
And so we have, just talk about, just to sort of see the wealth and the extravagance of what an NFL owner has as a plaything. This is a great, great way to illustrate that. These yachts are insane.
Yeah, okay. So there's a yacht war going on between Dan Snyder and Jerry Jones. Dan Snyder owned a yacht that was worth something like $70 million years ago. That was called, I think the Queen Anne, I believe is what he named it. Well, he has recently purchased a new and improved yacht that's more expensive, that's worth $100 million, that's a couple hundred feet long, and get this, has an IMAX theater inside it. Because why own a yacht if you can't have an IMAX in it? There's no point in owning a personal cruise ship if it doesn't come with an IMAX. Well, Jerry Jones one-upped him, and he spent over $200 million on his yacht, and it's literally the size of a football field. It's like 300-something feet long. There's a lot of billionaires that own yachts. I'd love to know how much time these guys spend on a yacht every week. Is it more than a week or two, at most? What I really want to see, somebody may out there make this happen. I want to see Dan Snyder sail the yacht up the Potomac River straight into downtown DC, park it. What's that area down there called? No, it's the where the seafood restaurants are. You can drive your boat up to. That's in DC. Neither one of us are DC guys anymore. Is it the National, the Washington DC Harbor, something like that? I want to see that yacht parked in downtown DC, and I want to see Dan Snyder get off this boat with his sunglasses and his suit on, jump in a helicopter and fly to a game. Because that would just be the ultimate, you people are peons and I am not kind of move. But it's a yacht war between billionaires. It's something that, less than 0.01% of the people in this country can relate to. It's ridiculous. I can't blame them, I guess, for buying yachts if they have so much money that it just doesn't matter. But it's a pretty, in the case of the Redskins, it's pretty tone deaf to advertise your yacht, in a time like this.
Yeah, it's the National Harbor, the DC National Waterfront.
There you go. That's why I want to see that yacht parked at the DC waterfront.
If you want to know more, you go to nationalharbor.com. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting, and I am, especially without John here, because he would probably even be a bigger economic justice warrior than me. But we're already Snyder. You may have noticed announced presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren already using Snyder's yacht as the talking point on her wealth tax proposal. So you will already, so it's already entered the narrative at that level. And considering that the Redskins, they were the fourth or fifth most hated company by some recent poll.
Well, yeah, that was like a local poll. I don't think nationwide the Redskins would enter a calculus on that.
I know, but it just goes to your point around optics.
Somebody dreamed up a poll.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody dreamed up.
So
a poll.
I would expect we will see Snyder and Jera's yachts pulled up as talking points and as memes and as visual images as we have a national conversation about wealth for sure.
Yeah, and they're not the only billionaires with yachts. I think every billionaire owns a yacht, it seems like.
Yeah, it's just that...
Because there's just no point in being a billionaire if you can't have a yacht.
But they have name recognition, so the combination of those two things will bring them up.
And it's still clearly a battle between the two of them, who can have a bigger yacht. So don't be surprised if you see, Snyder's bought another yacht in a few years from now that's bigger. It's going to be the size of the Empire State Building or something.
If only he would care about competing with them on the field.
He doesn't. Dan Snyder cares about, I think, more. He's more thrilled that he's the owner of the Redskins than he does care about the Redskins themselves. I'm convinced of this. I think that's. I had an epiphany because we hear that Dan Snyder's a big fan, and he was as a kid. But I think what means more to him is the ego trip of being the owner of the Redskins than it really is about him being a fan and wanting to win. I truly believe that of him. I think that's his mindset. It's just all an ego trip.
Can't argue with that, and there is the boat to prove it. All right, with that, we will step off. We will turn in our first mates hats and bring this show to a close. Steve, any parting shots?
No. Hey, everybody tune in. I hope you tuned into the Pro Bowl and watched it. So you can make some dollars from the NFL. But no, seriously, enjoy Super Bowl week. It's always fun. Look forward to rooting for whoever is that's playing the Patriots.
Have a prediction on the game?
I can't. It's hard to predict to bet against the Patriots. So I hate to see them win again. But they've won 5 of these things. And the Rams are new. I thought McVay looked a little bit swallowed up by the moment last week and kind of got lucky. So I'm going to predict a decent game, entertainment-wise, but Patriots victory.
Yeah, I would probably agree. I think there's a little bit of a poetic narrative, too. Because I don't see the Brady Belichick combination having much more shots at this. Just, old man age in terms of Brady. But so there would be a certain poetry of a bookend to begin this run and end this run with victories over the Rams. So I would probably have to begrudgingly predict a Patriots win.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because nobody wants to see that. And to be quite honest, I think the Patriots has kind of ruined playoff football for many people because everybody's just so tired of seeing them. But it's tough to bet against them. I'd be afraid to place a monetary bet against them at this point. I really
Yeah,
would.
and they had all their bad karma came last year at this point.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, enjoy the Super Bowl, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time. Bye.